The year is 1991. Your name is Sega, and you just put out Sonic the Hedgehog, a game that's about to revolutionize the games industry, inspiring God knows how many other games going forward, and truly sparking the first great console war. Everything is perfect. And you're just left with one tiny question. Now what? You just put out one of the most influential games of all time, the game that's going to define the legacy of Sega. What's the logical next step? Well, we're doing a sequel. After Sonic the Hedgehog released, the development team split in two, one staying in Japan, and the other moving to the place that gave us Fortnite. The developers that were still in Japan would begin working on a little game you may have heard of called Sonic the Hedgehog 2, whilst the ones who would move to the US were assigned with a slightly different project. Around this time, Sega had been preparing to release a CD add-on for the Genesis, the Sega CD, and it needed a killer app. And who better than their new mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog, to take on the starring role? What began as merely a port of the original game quickly expanded and took on a life of its own, becoming a new game entirely, now known as Sonic CD. Quite the history, huh? It feels as though ever since its release, Sonic CD has been that strange black sheep of the franchise. The one that's talked about plenty and introduced a lot to the series, but isn't as well respected as its peers. A lot of people overlook CD since it was sandwiched between the second and third games, some of the most beloved games to feature the blue bastard. But with that said, I think Sonic CD is awesome and one of my favourite installments in the whole lineup. Why, you might ask? Because this game is damn creepy. It's like a look into an alternate universe where instead of getting the Sonic 2 we got, the devs said, what if we got weird? And this is the result. An oddly atmospheric, surreal experience with time travel mechanics. The alternate universe analogy is a bit literal. Considering the original Sonic the Hedgehog team split apart, both games were developed on the opposite side of the globe, and they were intended to come out in the same year. As a kid, I grew up with Mega Collection Plus, among other games, and for the longest time, I had no idea that a video game named Sonic CD even existed. I vividly recall years down the line, when I first got my hands on Super Smash Bros. Brawl and read through some of the trophy descriptions, I was baffled when Amy's first appearance was listed as being Sonic the Hedgehog CD. All I could think about when it came to the term CD was audio discs, so the logical assumption in my mind was that Sonic CD was some sort of Sonic audio drama that released on CDs back in the day. Don't ask, I was young and dumb. Years went by, I became more tech savvy, and I started using the internet often, becoming more familiar with Sonic's vast library. And that includes Sonic Schoolhouse, but also Sonic CD. From the get-go, this game just fascinated me. It truly felt like an otherworldly experience, something unlike anything else in the franchise. And yet, something about it gave off this strange, unnerving vibe too. It was one of my early fixations in the online horror scene, something I would get incredibly interested in back in the day, and to an extent, still am. A lot of this has been talked about to death online, but there are some bizarre Easter eggs in CD, like Sonic breaking the fourth wall and ending the game if you bore him for too long, and all of these strange sound test screens. They range from, "Aw, it's Tails," to, "Hey look, Baby Sonic," "Friday Night Funkin'," Batman? But most infamously, this. There's been all sorts of rumours and speculation about this screen, what it means and why it was placed here throughout the years. From this being Sonic with Mario's face, I don't know where they came to that conclusion, to the signature translating to Satan. But none of this is true. Could you believe that? People would just go on the internet and tell lies? Fricked up. Ironically, I don't think the screen was even really intended to be spooky, judging by how the Japanese version of the game had a completely different soundtrack, and it gives a much different vibe. The changes in the American soundtrack really add to the creepy atmosphere and reputation the game got in the West. I have no idea what they were thinking with some of these choices. For example, and for comparison, here's what the game over theme sounded like in Japan. Very funky and smooth, I dig it. And here's the American version. You have no idea how much a 12-year-old goat was terrified of this theme. Tails doll and the Luigi's Mansion beer game over. Don't bully me, man, I was a kid. Despite being from a much more tame soundtrack, even the Japanese boss music gives me chills. It's not creepy or anything, but the vocals are a tad off-putting. It's not really something you'd expect to hear from a Sonic game. As an adult though, I can appreciate the hell out of this. Sonic CD has one of the best video game soundtracks of all time, regardless of which version you're listening to. The bizarre vibes of Sonic CD don't just end at the Easter eggs and soundtrack though, because there's other parts of the game which stand out in strange and unique ways too, further adding to the game's mysterious vibe. A lot of creative choices, like Sonic having a voice, which was tragically removed in Sonic Origins, come on! To Robotnik's weird, unique sprite that only appeared in this game, and the fact that the game deals with time travel, featuring all these dystopian versions of every zone. If you don't act in this game, destroying the generators and the Metal Sonic holograms, or alternatively collecting the time stones, Little Planet is doomed to be ravaged by Robotnik. Usually in Sonic games, if you don't beat all the completion requirements, you'll get a little post-credit scene of Robotnik juggling the Chaos Emeralds as a reminder of, hey, you didn't completely stop him. It's all implied and not much else. Even the infamous bad ending of Sonic 2 8-bit, in which Tails dies, is all just left to the imagination. Nothing is outright stated. But here, no. You see with your own eyes what damage your neglect is causing. These areas are being destroyed by Robotnik because you aren't doing your all to save this planet. Oh, and if it couldn't be any worse, it's also implied in Sonic 4 Episode 2 and Sonic Generations that the bad ending is canon due to Stardust Speedway being in the Bad Future timeline. Oops. And that's Sonic CD, an underappreciated gem of a game which for whatever reason also happens to feature some of the creepiest undertones of any family-friendly platformer I've ever played. So much of it hardly even feels intentional, like they didn't mean to scare players, but for one reason or another, they did. From American versions of the music tracks clashing with the intended tone, to flat-out weird shit. Seriously, why is Hedgehog Man a thing? Sonic CD is truly lightning in a bottle. What was intended to be a CD conversion of one of the early 90s biggest games, evolved into something truly special that can stand on its own, even if it had to scare the piss out of a 12-year-old goat.